With all the talk about veterans coming home, one of the cruel results of war is many of our nation's servicemen and women don't get to come home. About 125,000 are buried in overseas resting places, thousands more in the 147 national cemeteries spread across the country. One of those cemeteries is in the Piedmont, but many aren't aware of how it came into being. In fact, it represents one of the saddest and most tragic parts of our local history. It's among North Carolina's most tranquil places, the Salisbury National Cemetery. There are 6,700 gravestones here at the original historic site, 7,400 here at the cemetery annex next to the Salisbury VA Medical Center. Veterans aren't the only ones buried here.
There's spouses buried here, there's dependent children also buried within veteran grave sites.
Right. Tim Bloom has helped maintain the cemetery for nearly 20 years.
There's veterans from Spanish-American War all the way through Afghanistan, Iraq.
But this cemetery dates back to the Civil War because Salisbury was in the central part of North Carolina and near a key railroad line. The Confederacy turned an abandoned cotton factory into a prison. Its inhabitants were mostly Union prisoners of war.
But there were also conscientious objectors.
Okay.
There were also deserters, both from the North and the South.
Okay.
So it was a mix.
This building, several city blocks from the cemetery, is the only part of that old prison still standing. It was a guardhouse near the entrance to the prison complex. It was a complex because, as this model illustrates, it consisted of multiple cottages in addition to the main building. Everything worked well here until the North stopped exchanging prisoners of war with the South in late 1864. That's when the prison's population exploded.
There were 10,000 men in a prison that occupied maybe 4 or 5 what would be today's city blocks.
That's right, 10,000 in a facility built for only 500. And the conditions were?
Terrible. Rats were caught to get some kind of protein at all that ran along the gates of the prison. Men would dig bunkers to get any kind of shelter.
And it didn't take long for dysentery, malaria, scarlet fever, and smallpox to run rampant, not to mention starvation and exposure.
They were dying at a horrible rate. The bodies would be put into the dead house, stripped of their clothing because those living needed it.
And then the prison just couldn't bury them fast enough. And here's where the story gets really sad. In an open cornfield just a few tenths of a mile from the prison, they dug trenches. And in those trenches, they literally dumped thousands of bodies in one big unmarked grave. That cornfield was right here in this open grassy area, the only part of this cemetery where you don't see a large number of white headstones. White headstones marked unknown do mark where the trenches were. And after this became a national cemetery, Congress in the early 1870s erected this monument in honor of the 11,700 unknown soldiers believed at the time to be buried here. More research and magnetic imaging later led many to believe the number was actually more like 3,500 to 5,000. Why the discrepancy? Why such a big...
Well, the records were burned, and there was no actual proof of that.
Right.
And then the northern states might have wanted to make it look worse than it was.
Yeah. But there's never been any doubt the number was large. So large, 2 of those northern states, Maine and Pennsylvania, erected in the early 1900s their own monuments in honor of their soldiers buried here.
It's a harsh story. It's not our finest hour, but it's important that we remember it so we don't let it happen again.
And in the meantime, the Salisbury National Cemetery sits as a paradox, a reminder of the horrible things that can happen during war, but at the same time, a beautiful, peaceful resting place for those who gave so much. As for the old Salisbury prison, Union General George Stoneman burned it to the ground when he and his forces attacked Salisbury in April of 1865.